Ki Kwave Indigenous Cause, Wabajeshin and Dudan, Minneapolis and Dunjaba, Galba Ganaka Isnakade Ishkoningan Winjabaya, me which so I just said hello, all my relatives. My name is Amalia Galvan. My Indian name is Good Earth Woman. I am from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and my reservation is White Earth. And I just wanted to share a little bit about my academic career. So this is my first year at MCSA. I am sustainability officer. I am doing a double major in Native American studies and environmental science. And as this sustainability forum is Indigenous and underrepresented populations, I just want to explain why we chose that. We wanted to have Indigenous perspectives at the forefront of this event. Over the past couple of years, MCSA has been building their Indigenous representation in the student government, and we wanted to emphasize this because of our history here from the Morris Industrial School and our flourishing Native populations today, because we have 32% of our Morris population, which is really great. With this event, we wanted to blend the narratives of Indigenous knowledge and traditional Western thought by providing a platform for Indigenous scholars to share their research and other organizations that have. We wanted to feature these researchers and stuff for the great work they're doing in our communities. A lot of these topics presented may not be what people may traditionally think of in Western academic environments. So that's why we'd like to highlight them today. But before we start the presentations, I'd like to do some acknowledgement. This is a really big event for us, and I worked with a lot of people to get this going. I'd like to thank all the speakers and demonstration table presenters for providing the content. I'd like to thank all my fellow MCSA colleagues for putting it together today's event. Especially Noah Muzzy, Dylan Young, Delaney Test, some staff, Troy Goodnow, David Israel Swenson, Liz Thompson, and Tony Nemers. Our co-sponsors, Equity and Diversity and Intercultural Programs with the World Cultural Heritage Series, Sustainability Club, the Sustainable Development Goals Initiative, Campus Activities Council, Office of Sustainability, Native American and Indigenous Studies with the Iron Fund and the Mellon Environmental Stewardship, Place and Community Initiative. The Native American Student Success Program. I'd like to thank everyone who's helped promote this event. We wouldn't be here without all of you. But now, without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the screen Dr. Michelle Montgomery with her presentation titled Embracing Mindfulness in a Climate Justice World. Thank you.
So Pilha Kwaido for joining me today. It's such an honor and blessing to be a part of this important event. I'd like to acknowledge all of you, your ancestors, and your spirit. I would also like to acknowledge all the things that we're healing from the stillness, from the pandemic, as well as all the other things that are going on in the world today. So first and foremost, I'm Halawasa Pony, Eastern Band Cherokee. I am a forever student. And my talk today is about embracing mindfulness in the climate justice world. You know, we talk a lot about what we need to do to create sustainability, what we need to do to acknowledge the reciprocity of our relationships, what we need to do to kind of re-engage ourselves to be emotional human beings. And so I want to talk about this from the work that I've been doing for such a long time. And it really is about embracing your whole self. Like, how do we get to that safe place? So my mentor and uncle, Daniel Wildcat, who is faculty member and administrator at Haskell Indian Nations University, he talks about traditional ecological knowledge in a way of holders that acquire their knowledge intergenerationally through lifetimes of attentiveness and mindfulness to places. And these places are pretty much living systems, just like research is living knowledge. Our knowledge is our elders. They're part of us for many layers of ancestors and generations. living systems we consider our home for this reason. Citizen science, which we hear a lot about in sustainability, seen through the eyes of Indigenous peoples, might be better named as community science. And many of us in our languages, we don't have a particular word that says community. It translates to family. So this is a really awesome image. I do a lot of work with the School of Medicine in regards to really unpacking what does the word justice mean when we talk about environmental health disparities, and how do we re-engage our whole selves to be a part of this topic. So when we talk about sustainability, some of the things that are often left out of the conversation is mental wellness. And for me, what's more important is that spiritual wellness. So this diagram really reflects a lot of things that are happening in the climate change world in regards to human health and mental health impacts, being displaced. There's so many different things that we should talk about in regards to sustainability. But for us, what's really important that for us to think about today is how do we call each other into conversations to bring our whole selves, to talk about how do we heal from inside out, right? Versus all the other different parameters in which we talk about in Western science. So this is a great diagram. It's from the Center of Disease Control. And I love the fact that it's now acknowledging that there's this huge component of mental health that we need to talk about when we talk about sustainability. So how do we sustain ourselves when we look around us? You all have had a pretty warm season in Minnesota. I'm on the Olympic Peninsula and we've had snow. And in other places, particularly the East Coast, they're dealing with very erratic weather. So some of the new terminology that I think it's really important that we bring into our conversations, and not just in higher ed. One of the most important things that we know as Indigenous peoples is that our conversations are always multi-generational. So it's important to include K through 12. It's important to also include our elders. It's also important to include those that are parents, those other mothers, those other uncles, all those different parts of that multi-generationality that needs to come into this concept. But when we talk about spiritual wellness, when we talk about the difference between curing and healing, it's important to bring into this conversation some new terms that I think are very important. Eco-anxiety. When we look around, there's so much anxiety around fire season, droughts, too much rain, eco-grief, the displacement, the lack of green spaces. We see more and more in urban areas that there's a lack of green spaces. So we're losing a lot of green spaces. You move forward into rural areas, particularly rural agriculture areas. Often farming is not economical feasible for a lot of families and they're having to sell their land. And so that becomes developed into this capitalistic, new island. We have eco paralysis of not knowing where to begin. How do we even start the conversation? We also have eco guilt, feeling guilty about what have we not done and what can we do to make it better. So these are some really great terms that I often use when I have conversations with people about sustainability and how do we bring our whole selves to this conversation. But part of that is being an emotional human being. So we know about first or second grade in our educational training, we're taught that being emotional is an inferior trait. You fast forward to a pandemic, you fast forward to a lot of environmental disparities that we're seeing from pipelines, from fires, flooding, where I'm from, lots of flooding from hurricanes. And then how do we have these conversations if, in about first or second grade, they say that being emotional is inferior. And so you fast forward to where we are now, and we're challenged to be emotional beings. So how do we really talk about this in a healthy way? So from a community science approach, these are really important questions that I always like to unpack. What interdisciplinary research skills and goals are needed to align with the priorities and interests of BIPOC populations for inclusive community science? So how are we at the table versus being an afterthought? How are marginalized people, in particular Indigenous peoples, when we know that the majority of the Superfund sites in the United States are either on our reservations or bordering our communities? This also impacts other people of color. So how are we brought to the table to really talk about what our priorities and interests are? For example, where I'm from, we have a lot of industrialized agriculture. And industrialized agriculture, when you live in an area where there's constant flooding from hurricane, we have massive, massive problems with water pollution. In my community in the mid 70s, early 80s, a company from upstate New York dumped PCBs in my community. So it's not a matter of if you are exposed to things that will cause cancer, but it's a matter of when, when will you be diagnosed? And so in my community, we have a big problem with cancer based on these types of things that have happened through the years. So how do we talk about our priorities and interests? And being from the East Coast, my priorities and interests in our communities would be totally different from the Pacific Northwest, the Midwest, or even the Southwest. So how do we have these conversations, but real conversations? What questions are required to include place-based specific relevant research? So when we talk about sustainability, we need to find more practical long-term solutions, not just quick fixes, not helicopter research, but how do we make all of the facets that we need to take on the responsibility of our relationships with the natural world and our neighbors? How do we take on this and be more inclusive? So some of the things that I like to talk about when I'm having these critical conversations, it's also about creating a safe space. It's also about allowing people to only bring the layers that they can bring with them and understand, excuse me, and understand that that's okay. So how do we complete these phrases? So equity responds to, inclusion asks, justice responds to, and diversity asks. One of the things my grandfather used to always ask me is how do you teach someone to have a moral compass? And that's a big question. And when we look at all of these terms, a lot of us can really talk about a lot of historic trauma, it's generational, but how do we call each other into the conversation and really talk about mental wellness, spiritual wellness, and how do we bring our whole selves to this and be okay with those layers in which we want to talk about? So here's another great chart when we talk about ecological grief and anxiety. And a lot of work that I've done working with Rising Voices and Indigenous Peoples Climate Change Working Group as well, and the School of Medicine, in particular in the context of the Department of Bioethics and Humanities, we talk a lot about how do we allow people to understand that learning is emotional. How do we allow people that when they figure out, when they unlearn and relearn that learning is emotional, how do we hold space for that? So this model also shows some of the responses, and it goes into ecological grief and anxiety are, reasonable and functional responses to climate-related losses. And we can all relate to that. Population level emotional distress, anxiety, and grief are increasing. We know that for a fact. Urgent responses, how do we respond to these particular things? In the state of Washington, we've seen a huge influx of people from California, Texas, and a lot of other different places based on climate change. And so we have to take these conversations very serious when we're talking about emotional health, mental health. How do we really move beyond those stigmas to really talk about that being an emotional human being is quite healthy, and it should be more welcome in these particular conversations. So when we talk about sustainability, we also have to talk about how do we sustain our spirits? How do we sustain our whole selves? But how do we sustain our relationships? Because where I'm from and my teachings have taught me that I have an inherent responsibility to all my relations. So how do I do that while at the same time acknowledging that there's still a lot of healing that must take place when we start talking about what does justice demand? When we talk about climate change, environmental justice, environmental health disparities, the list goes on and on and on. So here's a diagram that I developed a while ago, and I really like to go back to this because as a forever student, when I look at this through the years, I see so many different layers that are unpacking. So in the epicenter of the way that I look at my work as asking the question, as Cornel West always says, what does justice demand? Traditional knowledge. So our knowledge systems are plural. And I think a lot of times there's spaces where they coin TEK, traditional ecological knowledges, as a one size fits all. And we all know that our knowledges are place-based and it's not a one size fits all, but we come from these different pillars. And the pillars can be described in so many different ways, but from a traditional knowledge perspective, I always go back to ethics, knowledge, and practice. You know, what are our values? What are our responsibility? We know our knowledges are based on our culture, our language, physical and spiritual health, traditional environments. Our practice is our community, family driven, and expertise from our families and communities, and being present in the community is always a practice. Always coming into our communities with humility and grace. And so that's why I'm just so honored to be able to share this information with you. And, you know, how do we really talk about being emotional? How do we do that when we know it's triggering? And what does that mean to foster a healthy, holistic way of life? How do we foster, you know, self-determination? How do we foster engagement? And all of these things are not a one-size-fits-all. So Uncle Wildcat also states that I believe that if I can sit out there long enough, those crows, the trees, and the wind can teach me something about how to be a better human being. I don't call that romanticism. I call that indigenous realism. And indigenous realism to me, I like to coin myself as an eco-critical race theorist. First, I want to undemonize critical race theory. You know, a lot of people, when they hear critical race theory, it's, you know, here's the angry brown bumblebee, you know, just throwing stones at racism, but it's bigger than that. One of the tenets that I love so much about critical race theory is about the conduit of voice. How do we decolonize the narrative? How do we allow the erased to speak? How do we allow the oppressed to speak? So eco-critical race theory, you know, it systematically examined the social historical power dynamics pinpointing the social status. So it's racial hierarchy and environmental racism. When we think of environmental racism, we can actually look on a map and really pinpoint what communities of color are impacted by what types of industrial harms. And the list could go on and on. You know, we're still talking about in Michigan having clean access to water. And in my community, we're still talking about what are we going to do about buckling roads when, you know, FEMA comes in once, they don't come in repetitive amounts of time. So what do we do? So all these things are about, you know, how do we uplift the voices of the people? And how do we acknowledge that everyone's voice is going to be different? We know that words are very powerful. As an eco-critical race theorist, I want to share, words are very powerful. And the words in which we hear and read are determined by our lived experiences. They're all determined by how we have walked our path in life and our experiences. Indigenous cultural autonomy, to me, it's not the Western concept of I, me, mine. From Indigenous perspective, I've never been taught that. It's always we. How do we? So when I think of Indigenous cultural autonomy, it's like an onion. You know, we go to our aunties or our parents or whoever those folks are that are dear to us to actually, you know, really talk about what to do, how do we do it, and how do we be inclusive. And tribal participatory research, a lot of us have heard about community-based participatory research, but what I love about tribal participatory research when we talk about sustainability and how do we use Western ecological knowledge and traditional ecological knowledge, tribal participatory research is exclusively about highlighting, uplifting, front and center our sovereignty. So here's a couple of tenets of eco-critical race theory. It recognizes environmental racism as endemic in Indigenous peoples' lived experiences. It expresses skepticism towards the dominant legal claims of a post-racial society. It challenges the anthropocentric ecological ahistorism and insists on decolonized historical analysis, you know, because we know our histories are often told for us, and they're told from a totally status quo privileged lens. So how do we switch that around where we talk about the ecological connection as our elders, as particularly from our creation stories? Insist on recognition of self-determination and sustainability as living knowledge of Indigenous peoples and our communities of origin to analyze settler colonial laws and policies. Indigenous knowledges are interdisciplinary with a collective responsibility, works towards the end of eliminating racial and environmental oppression of Indigenous peoples, lands, and seascapes. So these are the tenets that I've kind of adapted to the original critical race theory tenets. And these really are important when we start talking about climate justice, climate science, the types of research, research ethics. What does that mean to sit among people and talk about justice? How do we gauge the moral compass so that we all can find like synergies? So reciprocity from my perspective is response to the community needs. It empowers the community. And it's not about going into a community dictating what's best for them or what you can do for them, but it empowers the communities. That means you acknowledge their knowledges, you acknowledge what their priorities are, and what's the responsibility of knowledge. Dr. Robin Kimmier talks about this quite a bit, is that knowledge has an inherent amount of responsibility, and knowledge is only important in the ways in which we share it. So what does justice demand? What is the added value of community science? Who should participate in bi-directional conversations about community science? And how should BIPOC communities cohesively participate? So actions, we always have to have some actions. So how do you decolonize the narrative? Who defines for whom the meaning of diversity and safe science? What are the rules of engagement? How do we engage? And it's not, this very settler colonial one size fits all perspective of you have a meeting, you come up with a goal, you say these are the outcomes you want to have. Rules of engagement are very cultural. It's also about acknowledging our culture protocols for meeting people. So what are the rules of engagement? Bidirectional safe space for researchers and community partners to bring their whole selves or those layers of themselves they'd like to bring or can bring for that day. What are professional development workshops on history of place? And that's really important. We hear a lot about land acknowledgements, but I think a lot of people don't understand the true meaning of land acknowledgements. Land back movements are real. Land acknowledgement really is also about, in my opinion, that, once you acknowledge the lands of the people, then that should be infused in the curricula throughout the institution. That's acknowledging history of place. It's also bringing similar faces of the populations in which you serve so that we can feel equitable and feel cohesively integrating ourselves into these spaces. And these are just a couple of references that I placed up here to share with you. And Pilahuk Wado, I put a link here to the Indigenous Speaker Series, and I welcome all of you to engage at some point in time.
Thank you for sharing your insightful perspective, Michelle. I appreciate you for speaking with us today. Next, I'd like to welcome Teresa Peterson to the front. Her presentation is titled Makoche Ki Mitakuye, My Relative, the Land.
You'll be able to hear me, right? Yeah. Sitting on the floor with my legs crossed, my gaze looks out onto Makoche Ki Mitakuye, my relative, the land. Before closing my eyes, my gaze spans the Wato Oyate, the plant nation. I focus on the light behind my eyes. My sacred essence travels from the base of my skull to the end of my spine. It expands beyond the confines of dense matter, seeking a grounding space of cosmic comfort and knowing. I imagine my energy, now an illuminating lavender current, moving beyond my lighted fingertips and toes, past the green grasses. It burrows within the cool soils and weaves between entangled roots. An abundance of relatives greet me, their acceptance immeasurable. Hello, friends, is all I can whisper. Mouth agape, catching tears of elation and immense gratitude. We are here for you, always. They share without words or whispers, but only the sounds a heart can hear. Gratitude, my relatives, for reminding me that I am connected to all that is. I benefit from these spiritual experiences of enlightenment anytime through yoga and meditation, from the mat to the gardens, on the deer and rabbit trails through the woods, and amongst the evening and early morning stargazing. I feel the same connection through my fingers as I dig into the cool soils of spring, as they brush across the prairie grasses of summer, or touch the orange and magenta and brown leaves of autumn, or as they gently tap tree branches that release a cascade of winter frost falling and melting across my face as I look up at the blue, blue winter sky. So, greetings, relatives. I shake your hand with a good heart, and I'm so happy to be here. Thank you to Elena and Alana and all the students for inviting me. It's really an honor to be here. I'm going to just share, and they're going to pull it up, right?
Yeah.
Yep. A little bit about just like my own, personal practices in our family. And so just to share, like I'm a gardener, I'm a grower of foods. We nurture pollinators, we forage, we gather, we preserve, we share, and we're nourished by all that we harvest. The garden provides a physical, mental, and emotional support, a space for me to practice mindfulness. The planting and growing spaces and the foraging and healing landscapes that overlook the wide Minnesota River Valley provide me a spiritual sanctuary. I continue to cultivate this way of life as it heals, it nurtures, and sustains my spirit, mind, and body. As I commune with the land beneath my feet, the homelands of my Dakota people, I have come to understand that this is ceremony. And so, all right. Yeah, this is where I live. So that was taken this fall, and in a morning sunrise, which it's one of those moments you go out and you breathe the day. So you can go to the next slide. So, as I shared, this is like a seasonal way of life. And so Wetu is a time of blood. It's also known as spring. And so I'm going to just share little snippets of my seasonal experience. Inside, we start seeds. We start tomatoes, peppers, sometimes occasional leeks, flowers. And then outside, you can see the garlic just peeping up that we planted in the fall. And of course, across the area are perennials, rhubarb, all the flowering trees. And you can go to the next slide. And here you can see we're tapping maple trees that you just saw in the front. Chahampi Titika, Hat and Gahapi. We're making maple syrup, and this is Mihihana. This is my partner, and I love that he still uses the wood stove because it gives you such a flavor. That smoky flavor. Then you can go to the next. So don't get to the time of potato or summer. So you'll see one is a picture of our garden, and then the raspberries, and there's one of our relatives, Domi, in there. If you can see, can you see them? Yeah. Somebody once asked me, how much of the food you grow, like what's your percentage? And I really couldn't answer that, but just to give you an idea, we plant potatoes, onions, peas, and carrots, and greens and spinach, garlic, chives, and herbs. Last night we had a delicious basil pesto. Added a little, oh yeah, it's divine. Green beans, asparagus, raspberries, strawberries, blackberries, aronia berries, pumpkin, squash, zucchini, tomatoes, peppers. Our Indian corn, our Dakota popcorn, muskmelon, apples, and pears. And I probably grow, some of you know I'm like a bean freak. So we have like at least like a dozen beans we like to grow, the hard beans. My dad, just a few miles away, he plants the cucumbers, dill, and cabbage. And then we also forage, gather and hunt fish, deer, gooseberries, wild grapes, plums, choke cherries. Our medicines, sage and cedar, and of course the maple sap. You can go to the next one. And in the summer, you can see like we get a lot of tomatoes. If you've never had a Hungarian heart, it's the one. So we're canning lots of tomatoes during that time. So we preserve a lot of this food, of course, we dry and we can and we freeze. And you can see there's some tomato soup. We're making some salsa. My son there's got the, to juice them. I had a ton of tomatoes ripening, and there's the Hungarian heart. Our counter is stored with beans and dried apples and pears. Our freezer is full of fruits and vegetables, and our pantry is full of canned goods. We can go to the next slide. Dietu, time of otter. This is harvest time. We're preparing for winter. We're storing and preserving foods. We're gifting and trading produce. So those are the beautiful maples still. And those are some of the pears I don't know if Mary Jo's in here, but she's one of my trade partners. So when you have pears, you have an abundance, and then you gotta find people to trade some things with. So yeah. And then you can go to the next slide. Yeah. The spot ota unyu happy. So when apples come in every other year, they're abundant. And so we want to do lots of things with them. This year was one of those years. This is actually 2 years ago. Well, would it be 3 then? So this past year and then 2 years before that. But so we have, like, I just ate apples this morning that we still harvested. They're so good. And then we made apple pies again this year. And then my mom's makes the crust there. And then if you haven't ever had fresh pressed apple cider, you know who turned me on to that was Sandy up there. And so we went out and bought one, and then you can see me heaping out there. It's pressing. My dad, my kids all came over and helped us chop up this year. My mom's helping there wash some of the apples, but it's delicious. Making cider. You can go to the next slide. Waniatu, time when the snow lives. We rest, we repair, we tend to neglected tasks. We reflect, write, and recall sacred moments. We relive earlier seasonal experiences, and we dream of the ones to come. So you'll see some of our beans there. That's our dried, when we have a corn called waspuya, we dry for a soup. That's a sweet corn, and you dry it out in the sun, and it makes a difference truly than dehydrating it. And there's our Indian corn that we make a soup called vashtayapi to take the hull off, to take the ash. And you can go to the next. So woyude washteka uchaku hena delhapi. So during this time of winter, we're making good food and we're gifting. So you can see there's some of the beans, some soup. I make soup all the time in the winter, especially. And then there's I think Winona had helped bring that big Ika okosami, make me saying it wrong. Yeah.
And then the big squash.
Yes, the big squash, and that was one of my trades for the pears this past year, yeah, or 2 years ago. So we cook and bake hearty meals, we make gifts and feast, and we bring relatives together. This way of life is sustaining, not just for food, but it gives joy. And for example, I get out after the long winter, and there's such joy of coming back out in the spring. Mother Earth greets you with blossoms and tendrils and the miracles of birth. Sometimes we get to harvest things in the summer that you've nurtured for months and sometimes even years. I remember when we got our first harvest of pears, 6 years, and you bring out the basket and you're like, I got a dozen pears. But now we have like bushels of them. It nourishes us. They're so delicious. The taste of that Hungarian heart, absolutely the freshest you can get. Sneaking out in your pajamas and getting some of your breakfast. There's the freedom of pesticides and chemicals, and freedom from being so dependent on a system. There's gratitude. So grateful for when the rains come. I'm grateful for good soil, for spring, for sunshine, for the bees and the pollinators, for the family who helps us garden. I'm grateful for the relationships with family, with the land. You recognize the interdependency between Mother Earth, plant, animal nations, and yourself. And of course, there's that improved health, the physical. We recognize food is medicine. It's meditative and mindful practices. This way of life is seasonal, cyclical, a pattern of rites and rituals, repeated practices and prayers. So I had a Dakota elder once ask me, your culture and traditions are reflected in the way that you live. What are your rituals, your ceremonies? What do you do when you wake up? What do you do to celebrate the week? Ceremony is defined as a formal act of series or acts prescribed by ritual, protocol, or convention. Ni, mini, nachi, life, water, and spirit are ever present in my protocols and rituals of growing, foraging, preserving. These daily, weekly, and seasonal practices make up a year-round ceremony. So I wanted to end just with a little piece I'm working on right now. A new writing piece called A Perennial Odyssey. And this piece is taken from the section called Vidokyetu, so summer, and it's called Sustenance. We all hear about the pandemic, how pandemic has revealed already existing disparities, a failed foodway system, among many other broken systems. On the news, I observed long lines of cars snaking across our cities as people struggle to find food for their families. Food pantries are overwhelmed, seeing triple the number of patrons. Many we hear make use of this assistance for their first time. The food shortages and empty shelves in our supermarkets, the supply chain bogged down at sea, the unemployment, stay-at-home orders, and schooling in homes all contributed to the increasing demand for food. Food, what many of us take for granted, was now insecure. People were and are hungry. There were also those who took an opportunity to take up growing their own food. They began to purchase seeds, equipment, and gardening supplies until there was a shortage of that too. Our family couldn't find canning lids to purchase except for the exorbitant price ones found online for those taking advantage of the skewed supply and demand. Food sovereignty is the ability for the people to control the systems and mechanisms to produce, distribute, and consume food. It is having the ability to feed oneself instead of relying upon the corporate food system. Food sovereignty gained traction across households, communities, and tribes. Guiltily, I shared with Jay that I had never experienced hunger in my life. Sure, I've been hungry momentarily, like I'm getting a little bit hungry right now, knowing I would be eating soon, or by the choice, I've gone to bed a bit hungry when I'm on an early stage of a diet. Even during my childhood, I don't recall ever being hungry. You can see that when I'm a kid and then on the right there. I don't ever recall being ever hungry. I may have been deprived of trendy and designer clothes and shoes. I grew up on a farm where food was never an issue. We raised hogs, chickens, cattle, and had a garden that provided plenty of food. The basement stored my mother's canned goods in the 100-year-old house I was raised in. Several shelves held peaches, stewed tomatoes, corn, and even boiled chickens. Dad was also and remains an avid hunter. Thus our diet also included venison and waterfowl. I hold images and memories of butchering chickens, defeathering geese, ducks, and pheasants. I can still recall the process, including the tree stump that held the chopped heads of chickens. The hot water that helped to remove the feathers, the job of cleaning gizzards, that was one of my jobs. And the handheld blow torch to singe remaining pin feathers. I also hold harvest memories of digging potatoes out of the garden, including a time spent in the rain to save the potatoes before the weather would turn to snow. Canning memories of my hands placing peach pits in the bottom of wide mouth quart jars before filling them with peeled and harvested peaches. And when I started my own canning, I asked Mom, why did we have to include that pit if we're not going to eat it? She simply replied, because that's what my mom did. Today, my own basement shelves are stocked with salsa, tomato soups, spaghetti sauce, jellies, pie filling. Our freezers are full of green beans, kale, carrots, and berries. And our kitchen counter is full of jars of several varieties of heirloom beans, Dakota popcorn, dehydrated pears and apples. Nourishing foods are abundant in our home. We are a country of wealth and poverty, overweight and hungry, abundant and scarcity. The continuum between food insecurity and food sovereignty stretches across people and place. Who will continue to grow their own food after the pandemic is no longer the center of the news? Will we have changed society's food systems? Will we continue to provide opportunities for families to adopt sustainable approaches that support local and family food sovereignty? Opida Tampe Chichiapi, gratitude to all of you for listening.
Thank you for such an insightful presentation. I appreciate you sharing your manuscript. Oh,
no, that's not mine.
No, it's not. Yeah, the manuscript reading was very special. Lastly, before intermission, I'd like to welcome Lieutenant Gasco to the front. He'll be talking about 8th Fire Solar and the importance of solar thermal energy.
Waiting on the slideshow.
Do they have a mic for you or you just talk?
John, you want to say the words?
Top out, I guess, or Mike. I'll just talk loud. Everyone hear me back there? Good. I guess I'll just start with the introduction. My name is Quay Gasco. I work with 8th Fire Solar. I've been working there for about 3 or 4 years now. I originally started in a general labor install and manufacturing solar thermal panels. Solar thermal is different from solar PV in the way that we use the energy we take from the sun, right? With solar PV, you would be generating electricity to power your home. With solar thermal, we use a forced air system to heat a home or a building. They're still waiting on the PowerPoint. I'll try to keep talking as long as I can, but yeah, I'm not too used to like public speaking things, so you guys will have to take it easy on me, especially with all these academic heavy hitters. I guess I could talk a little bit about 8th Fire. So
Control of this.
awesome. Save myself. So I just click the arrows to go. So solar thermal at the travel level. Our mission statement: to combine traditional native views of land stewardship with modern renewable technologies, increasing energy independence will also stimulate travel economies. So at the end of the day, at 8th Fire, what we've been trying to do for the last couple of years, we've been going since 2017, is bring solar thermal as a technology to tribes. From there, we can train tribal members, so we can create jobs in the tribal community. And you know, at the end of the day, the resident, the customer will be able to get the clean, efficient heat from the system. The problem, rising heat costs. So if we look at this graph here, in 2019, I believe it was $1.275 per gallon for propane. And then in 2022, we jumped up to $2.605 per gallon. That's a pretty steady increase. And with, you know, supply chain issues, you know, politics, you know, the war that's going on right now, COVID-19, you know, that number is liable to increase. In impoverished communities and tribal communities, especially in the Midwest where winter hits hard, you know, that'll be an effect that we'll really feel, right? So if we take $2.605 per gallon times a 400-gallon propane tank, you're looking at about $1,400. And, you know, depending on your appliances and what you're using, you know, you might fill 2 or 3 times. And even with energy assistance programs through tribal communities, that's going to be a pretty costly sum, right? The solution to implement solar thermal and other renewable technologies at the tribal level throughout the Midwest. So this way we can kind of lessen the load of, you know, supply chain issues and the energy crisis, right? We can lessen the load a little bit for tribal members while also increasing energy independence, right? By giving them their own means of heating their homes, or, you know, with solar PV powering their homes. How does solar thermal work? So I kind of talked about this a little bit already, but our panels mount on a building's south-facing wall. They use a forced air system to recirculate the air through the panel, heat it up with the sun, and then deliver the heat anywhere in the home. It's a really simple system compared to like solar PV, where you'd have to do a lot of calculations to figure out wattage and you know, energy loads and all the appliances in the house. It's relatively simple, right? So the process. First, we do an initial site assessment. We come and we take some pictures of the property, and we look around, you know, and we talk to the homeowner, see where they want the heat delivered. We check out the area, you know, for trees and obstructions, whatever is going to be in our way. The second step would be system design and project planning. So we can design a system and size a system, but it's not always going to be, you know, we may have space for 5 panels on a wall, right? But the budget of the homeowner or whoever's buying the system, they might not be able to afford 5 panels, right? So that's where system design and proper sizing comes in. The third step, of course, would be the system installation. And that's where we'd like to take tribal members that we've trained in the past and, you know, give them some more work through the installation. Is your site solar compatible? So when we're looking at a site, the first thing we'd look at is the regional solar resource. We might pull up some maps and just look at the overall area. We'd see, you know, maybe there's a lot of trees in the area. Maybe it's the plains, maybe there's not a lot of trees, and it might look good. Then we go to the site, check out the site-based solar resource. Just because there's a lot of trees in the area at the site, there may not be a lot, or vice versa, right? Third, we look at the site-based needs and limitations. What's the heating load like in that building? Are we heating a living room or a small cabin or a bedroom or a hallway? Another thing to think about site assessment is the sun path. So in the summer, the sun will be higher in the sky, right? It's, you know, high noon. You'll see it almost directly above you. In the winter, there's a lower path, right? So with our panels mounting on the south facing wall, you catch the winter sun angles, right? That also allows you have space on the roof for for a PV system. So you can kind of work in tandem with the two and get some more efficiency in there. Another thing to think about is magnetic declination. It's kind of a hard concept for me to grasp when I first started researching it and learning about it. But basically it's the variation between true north and magnetic north. So with the magnetic fields in the north, they can mess with your compass's reading and they won't show you the proper direction. You can look up maps for this. But if you look at that red star, which is where we are 2 degrees east of north. So on the site assessment, we'd have to adjust for that. It's kind of a hard concept for me to explain. I'm not really the science math type guy. So that would be your first step here, your site assessment. This is a solar pathfinder, which is something that we use all the time for our solar thermal as well as solar PV. But if you look, you can see the reflections on the dome. So that would be your shading throughout the year. Those lines that go across are the months, and then you have the time of day. So with one look, you can see the solar resource for a site for the whole year, right? So it's a wonderful tool. We use it all the time. So this is like system design and installation. I'll kind of skim over a little bit because this is like a sustainability forum and I don't really want to talk about the whole process. If anyone's interested in it, I can kind of chat with them after it a little bit. But yeah, so system design, this is where we, like I said, think about space on the wall versus the heating load versus the customer's budget. And we design the system properly based on that. Installation is pretty simple. Anyone with some carpentry experience can get it done. It's a really simple, seamless process. This requires a little bit of power tool usage, cutting some siding off, and that's about it. So yeah, it's really simple compared to other renewable technologies. It's really cost effective, really simple, really accessible. So this is kind of like the model we've mocked up for our dealer program is what we call it, where we at Eighth Fire Solar, we'd have a discounted sale to dealers, preferably tribes and other organizations. From there, we can get some tribal members involved, get some job creation and profit for the tribe, and then goes to the home and business owners to get the clean and sustainable heat, right? So this is about getting energy independence for tribes at the end of the day, right? We want to, give them the tools they need to take this further and further and further. And it's really a win-win situation for everybody. The customer benefits, besides the heat and the lower amount of money spent on heating throughout the winter, you get an increased home value. That will happen with any PV install or solar thermal install. You increase the home value with that system. It's low maintenance, extremely serviceable. You get job creation in your community and increase energy independence at the residential level. Ethical solar. So this is something that I've kind of had to learn as I took on more of a sales and marketing role as opposed to just general labor. We can't always push a product, right? Sometimes we have to push just the efficiency, be it someone's budget or their ability to commit. Sometimes they won't be able to purchase a system. So that's where we push smaller things that they can do, be it from something as simple as putting some plastic on your windows, right? Or looking at your insulation in your home, in your attic, in your walls, maybe energy audit, And that's just kind of helping your customer, or just helping, it could be like your neighbor or whoever, just kind of informing them, keeping them, letting them know these different things they can do. This kind of shows us what I was talking about. It's the pyramid of conservation. If you look higher up, you see solar thermal at the top, you see solar, electric, and wind. And then at the bottom, it's just simpler things like, unplugging your TV or unplugging your microwave when you're not using it. Just some more, conservation techniques you could use, from the simplest to the most complex. But you see solar thermal up there. So that's where we get to talking about, just because they can't get a system doesn't mean they can't get some, conservation in their lives. Just a little rundown of what we've been doing. So we started in 2017. We did a technology transfer with our Real Solar. They are over in Bacchus, I think, or Pine River. They're a really cool organization. They helped us set up our assembly plant and just learn more about solar thermal. From there, we launched in 2018 officially. We started working with Leech Lake. We did some trains and installs there from 2018 into 2019. And then, of course, 2020, COVID-19 hit us. We're a really small group, so that was, we felt that pretty bad, and we shut down for a while about that. 2021, we purchased our new facility, and we partnered with Hammond Climate Solutions and the Solar Moonshot program. And we got some trainings going with them, with the Lower Sioux tribe, which I'll show some pictures of after this. 2022, got our patent purchased and transferred for our panels. And we started working on more trainings. Some of our past installs. So this one right here is, it's pretty, it's an interesting one, because this lady in Lake Vermilion, she wanted to do like a kind of experimental greenhouse in her basement. So we used our panel, and we took cold air from the top floor and piped it down to the basement, heat up that grow room a little bit more. This other picture is in Ponsford, where I'm from. It's just a installation that we did on our gas station there. Excuse me. These are just some past installs to show you some more of like how it looks and how it sits, right? This is a training we did at Leech Lake. We brought some tribal members out and got them trained up, and we hope to work with them in the future a little bit more. This one here was Boys Fort, I believe. Same thing, we brought some tribal members out, we got them trained up, did the installation with them. This one over here is the most recent training install we did. This was in Lower Sioux. There was 2 family homes with about 4 or 5 people in each of them. We installed 2 panels on each of the houses, so they'll have that heat and that system for years to come. This is the most recent install we did. This was a private homeowner in Niagara, Wisconsin. We went down there and we installed 2 panels on their workshop garage area. They wanted to get off of, well, they were using wood heat, but they're getting tired of hauling wood there every day. So we hooked up the system, and I just talked to them last week, and they're really enjoying it, and yeah, they're loving their system. Why now? So I think we all know about the climate crisis and some of the harmful energy extraction techniques that are going down. So solar thermal and renewables in general kind of give us a way to lessen that feeling on our Mother Earth, and work with some clean technologies. Why solar thermal? A big chunk of energy usage in Minnesota and the Midwest is just for heat, right? So with solar thermal, specifically, we can kind of lessen that a little bit more and get some clean energy sources going. I think that's all I got there.
So we have Winona scheduled at 5:45, so we have a couple minutes till then. I think there's a bathroom right across the hall, a water fountain as well, but yeah, we'll restart again shortly. Thank you.
Okay, so you guys know that you're relatives too. Okay. Yeah, your family.
I don't think I knew that actually. Yeah, honestly, but that's not surprising. Yeah, she's the one that said that. Oh yeah. He's doing a lot. And we're getting together.
You know, I just saw Sharon and she said something about
Did she ever do it?
well, I don't know if she finished it, but at least on the line.
I'm gonna message her.
Yeah. I know, I'm gonna try to just say, keep her, yeah, but it's really, yeah, well, you were
I'll do that. I just want to say this. We're going to Metro Western next week. That's a big deal. We'll be all right, but I'm really good at driving places. I've been driving since I was like 25. So, but that's not everybody. So I recommend everybody else. I drove through that tornado or whatever last weekend or something. It was all bad. Yeah, I drove through that by accident. Like it was so, the wind was so strong that I had to like drive like this to keep my steering wheel. And, like my forearms are all missing sore the next day just from driving home. That was crazy. There's a semi trailer that was just dropping on the way home. We're like, ooh, that's tough. Yeah, it's awesome. I hope you get in everything you want. It's so you ready for Christmas? Yeah, I've been here to go. All my professors since I'm in AS. Just like, go to the sustainable. Yeah, I did. I was like, oh, I wonder whose house they went to. I will know them. We're such a small community. We literally all know. Yeah, like you don't hear about something that like I don't really meet people that don't excuse me. Get you real quick. Good job. It's just us chatting. I'm gonna step outside real quick.
Oh my God. I tried to record this video. Oh, no.
Don't get quiet. I'm going down.
Everybody keep going. Yeah. Also, could you see around me? I know that. I don't want to make it noise. Tell.
Oh, no. Okay. Yeah, because. I'm gonna start so you can get quiet now.
thank you all very much for coming out. It's a real honor to be here with all of you. And, you know, I really enjoyed the last presentations. That was really refreshing. You know, you kind of, during this time, I kind of been hanging around home a lot. It seems like I said, look at all those things they're thinking out there. So I'm happy to be here and honored to drive down here from where I live, Bonnie Cog. So Anin Indoi Magabeduk. And this is the Jinakaz, Makuendo Dam, Bonnie Cog, Ishkaniganing, and Unjabami, which I'm just telling you where I'm from, you know, just a little bit north of here, a couples kind of slidey hours away. And just really honored, and I was really enjoying the time, and also enjoyed Gwei's recent presentation too. That's the first time I heard him speak. So it was good. Everybody is really good here. And I just thank you. My family has come down here. You'll see some pictures of them later on. But I'm going to talk kind of about, you know, what we're thinking now, and just, you know, was listening to what people were saying about land acknowledgement. And I was thinking about that one of the things that we don't do is we don't, you know, people begin to say the people that were there, but, you know, it is important to remember what is supposed to be there. I guess what I'm saying is, like, I look out here and I was like, oh, this is where the buffalo are supposed to be. You know what I'm saying? The land, in acknowledging it, it's also an acknowledgement, like more than just like words. It's like, what is this land supposed to be? How do we, that is what really, you know, is peace with earth, is when you have a way of life that is based on what the land's supposed to be, not necessarily your fantastic idea of what's supposed to happen on the land, right? And I think that's, you know, exemplifies some of the conflict we have today. But this month in our language, and you could sure feel it today, gosh, God no Jesus, this is what we just are finishing, the freezing over moon, you know, and you could see that's a November moon, but now it is just finally winter is settling in. Gosh, God no Jesus, and Manadu Jesus moons, and Ichina Jesus, and the Maven Jesus, Onaban Jesus, hard crusted snow moon around March, and then our syruping moon. And then Wabagana Jesus. I enjoyed looking at your pictures. They looked like our territory. My kids were with me, my sons, and I was like, yeah, that looks like us, huh? You know, but you know, these are moons that are based on you know, the land. All our moons, those are Anishinaabe moons, but Dakota moons are the same moons. And just a little different maybe how they say it. But I always remember that because, you know, I think one of the things important about language and place is it describes place, but also is that, you know, none of those moons is named after a Roman emperor, huh? It's possible to have an entire worldview that has nothing to do with empire. It's great. Fantastic. So this is, you know, this moment in time that we are in, and I'm a water protector. This woman's a water protector too. She's not missing anywhere. She's in downtown Duluth. She's about 30 feet tall and 20 feet wide, or something like that. 2nd Street and 2nd Avenue, ours by Votan. And it was put up right after the time of Standing Rock. And, you know, she is a water protector. And I think about that because it is a really good time to be a water protector. You know, and as someone who, you know, considers that, you know, as Anishinaabe women and as Anishinaabe people, that's our responsibility, is to protect our water. It's the 1/5 of the world's water here. They're making new water. It's the only water that is, only water that ever was. And so it is, you know, what we need for life. And as we look at the, you know, the world that we are in, we see that this year the Loire River is dry for the first time in written history. You know, these rivers are going dry, and the climate change refugees that are coming from everywhere are coming also because there is no water. And that is really why we must be water protectors, because without water, there's really no life. You know, and so it's not like an abstract style. It's a reality. You know, it is what it is, who we have the opportunity to be too. And I think about that because, you know, we were born in this time when, you know, there's catastrophes of biblical proportions all around us. You know, to the west, the fires, to the north, the ice caps are melting. To the east, I would say political disasters of biblical proportions as well. You know, the executive branch didn't look too good a couple of years ago. The judicial does not look good at all. You know, what am I saying? You know, this is like craziness. And to the south, you know, it is all kinds of storms and a pandemic. You know, these are also times that these are times that are, these are times of prophecy. That's what these are. These are the times of prophecy. You know, when they said that worlds would change. And I think about that because an indigenous concept is not one of Armageddon. An indigenous concept is a concept of understanding life, you know, as birth, as life, you know, as death and as rebirth. And it is a new world being born. And it is a changing time that is all around us. And sometimes I'm like, the prophecies talked about this. And they talked about, you know, I remember, you know, our own prophecy of the time of the seventh fire, when you have a choice between two paths, one well-worn and scorched and one green. That is one story. But, you know, as a young woman, I had a lot of privileges in my life. I got to hear a lot of cool people, hang out with a lot of cool people. You know, my father himself, he used to tell me about the time when there'd be no food in the store. I couldn't believe that, you know, but this is what he was talking about, is these times that we are in now, where there's food insecurity caused by a globalized food system that doesn't get food out during a pandemic. You know, this is what he was talking about. And those Hopis used to talk about these times. And I remember Thomas Banyaka, he would talk about the time when that gourd full of ashes would fall from the sky. And that was, you know, what they say, that Hopi said that was the atomic bomb. And then the Hopis talked about the new world was coming when they had a web in the sky. And they told us that in the 70s, because I am a child of the 70s. And in the 70s, they told us about that. We were like, what the heck is a web in the sky? Well, what is a web in the sky? That would be the World Wide Web. That's exactly what they were talking about. But at the time they were saying it, we had no idea what they were saying. Right? But here we are in the time of the World Wide Web, where I am on Zoom. I had this explained to me that these guys are my Zoom friends and those guys are my Zoom friends over there. You know, this is epic times, but these are times that were prophesized. Then the worlds are changing. Everything is changing around us. You know, Arundhati Roy, the great Indian writer, she talks about pandemic as portal. Pandemic is portal. She says, in the history of the world, pandemics have always caused societies to change. This one is no different. It is a portal between one world and the next. You know, we just saw that. We just saw what has happened. Because nobody in the smart, technological, scientific, politically correct, civilized society had any idea what to do during a pandemic. Because the thing is that things are bigger than humans. We're a pretty anthropocentric bunch. We're like, we got this. No, we don't got this. You know, that's the fact is that it's not smarts, you know, it's intelligence. It's indigenous intelligence. It's intelligence that understands the land, you know, and that is a different kind of you know, intelligence. But she talks about, Arundhati Roy says that in the time when there's a portal between two worlds, she says, what do you want to take through the portal? You want to take your avarice and your hatred, your data banks and your dirty rivers. She says, or do you want to walk through clean? You want to walk through clean? Like, what do you want to take? How many bags do you want to take with you? I could just ask my grandchildren how many bags of hot Cheetos they want. But that is really the question. You know, what you got to take with you. How heavy is your load, humans? You know, because we are, you know, we're kind of, we got kind of heavy in our load because we're so self-involved. You know, at the same time, you know, I see things are changing, and you know, we have just witnessed a major. We're in the middle of major surging social movements. Why do I say that? Because in my lifetime, at no point did I expect to see 44 statues of Columbus fall in a year. Right? Black Lives Matter, social movements saying we're done. We are done with Confederate soldiers. We are done with conquistadors, and we are done with Columbus. You know, I didn't expect to see those statues fall. I just had to keep looking at them and just try to gag that down every time I went into a city. I'm like, that's not okay. But you know, erasure is all about that. That's okay, and you know, you can just wipe out everything that is indigenous in a place. You know, and I think that we see that that is changing. We see that that is changing across, you know, and so I see that in this moment, you know, and I'm going to talk some about the political movements, but, you know, in this moment, movements are surging and they're ready for change. And so I say, you know, let us be the ones who step up. Don't be the ones who shy, you know, don't sit and chill too long. So this is what, in my mind, what legal systems should look like. This is called the One Dish, One Spoon Treaty. And we were given one of these by the Haudenosaunee, the Six Nations who make these. We were given one of these when we were at the camp on the Mississippi opposing Enbridge's Line 3. They brought one of these. This is a wampum belt. And I was given a replica of this wampum belt, but that is between the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe. About 800 years ago, we made a treaty called the One Dish, One Spoon Treaty. And it was reflected in this wampum belt. And that is the bowl and the spoon. But what it meant is that, you know, a long time ago, Malaysia, then the Anishinaabe, and, we were in the same area. We were in the same area. And we said, you know, they said, look, we all eat from one dish. We all eat from one dish. We have to take care of the dish. You know, we all eat from one dish. And then they talked about how, like, in a ceremony, you know, now we don't do it quite the same because you got the sippy cup, you know, but you go and you eat with one spoon in a ceremony. You serve with one spoon, you know, in our ceremonies. And in the purpose of that is to show also that you are relatives, that you are relatives. And so the teaching here is that we all have one mother. We all eat from one dish and we are relatives. You know, so it is really mature political, you know, decision making and treaty making that says things like that. You know, that says this is how we got to work together. And this was recorded by the French in 1706. That's when this was recorded by the white people, but it pre-existed the white people because the treaty was reaffirmed. You know, and they had a really good meal of, my family will like this, beaver tail hominy soup. That's the dish that is served in the recognition of that treaty. And on the Mississippi River, that's where we served that. Were you there at that feast? You ate in? No. We served the one dish, we served that dish, we served that there. So I want to talk about making America great again. This is when America was great, when there were 50 million buffalo. That's great. Single largest migratory herd in the world. And, you know, spanning an area, this largest biome in North America, the Northern Plains. And in this territory, those buffalo live on 250 different species of grass. And they just hang out. They do great. They don't require a fossil fuels ecosystem. They don't require cattle. They don't require a bunch of grain, water, irrigation. They don't require all of that. They just require prairie. And that is what a sustainable land-based economy looks like. And in the same place where there were once 50 million buffalo, there are today about 30 million cattle. And those cattle require a lot of fossil fuels to keep them going. And they're incredibly destructive in the world ecosystems. You know, and so, you know, you wonder, like, what was the plan? And in a moment of climate disaster, which animal you think you should bet on? You should probably bet on the buffalo. You know, because a buffalo will walk into a storm, a cow will run from a storm. And so you have, you know, I saw 100,000 cattle dead in I think it was 2013 in South Dakota, riding horse, frozen up against, standing up against a fence. You know, freak blizzard, they will flee and they will drive themselves into a ravine 26,000 in Colorado one year. You know, what you need is a guy who goes up in the middle of winter, goes like this, goes and gets some food. I saw them do that, you know, they feed themselves. That's how you do it. That's what America was great, you know? And America was great when we had 10,000 varieties of corn. Because the truth is that agrobiodiversity is what you want in any world. And besides that, why wouldn't you want agrobiodiversity? I mean, you know, I think about it and you know, these 10,000 varieties of corn were created or, you know, I mean, corn, I feel like corn is like shows that humans are cool. I mean, I know that's kind of strange, but some days I'm like, humans are totally jerks. You know, I'm like, I don't like humans very much. I prefer my dogs and my horses. I mean, but you know what I'm saying is, it's like, you know, we don't need me to tell you on that path because I'm sure you understand that train of thought. But you know, on the other side, corn doesn't exist in nature. Corn is only here because people like us went out there, like probably looking a lot like me, went out there and picked varieties and figured out how to breed 10,000 varieties of corn. So you can have all kind of colors of corn and all kind of different, like hominy corn and you know, flint corn and like all the corns you were showing, like all those kind of corns, like popcorn, you know, that's how you know America, you know, that you know, people are kind of cool. Humans are kind of cool. But you know, but the thing is that biodiversity is also what you want in any resilient system. You know, the Irish potato famine certainly should have taught us that the idea is not good to have one variety. So that is what is wrong with what is happening around us in these giant silos is monocrops that are not climate change resilient in any measure, you know, and add to insecurity. So on a worldwide scale, you know, we are where the wild things are. That's like the important thing for people to remember. Like it is cool to say, I really like indigenous people, but indigenous people represent ecosystems. You know, we are the only people left out there who still got our stuff, basically. Everybody else lives in these like, you know, denuded of life ecosystems. But on a worldwide scale, frankly, indigenous people are about 4% of the world's population and 75% of the world's biodiversity. We're the people in the rainforest. We're the people of the Pacific. We're the people of the Arctic. We're the people in northern Minnesota with the 10,000 lakes and lakes that you can drink the water out of. That'd be us, right? And so the thing is about allying with indigenous people, it is about allying with life, you know, being allies with life. Because the thing, in this world that we are in, you've got to protect the biodiversity. You cannot just replace it with some new, like, you know, new cool thing. You have to protect the biodiversity because that is the essence of life. That is the essence of Mother Earth. And so everywhere that there is indigenous people, there are these battles over biodiversity. No, this is some pictures of our territory. You know, this is a couple years ago. He looks older now. This is my grandson, Ande Gunz, and I on Shell Lake up there at the, you know, on the south side of the White Earth Reservation and the you know, head of the Shell River, which is where I camped quite a bit the last couple of years. These kids all camped with me. And this is wild rice. And I think about this because when I was coming down here, I was like, this is buffalo and wind and hemp territory. Well, where I live is wild rice and maple sugar, you know, maple trees and fish. It's a very clear, different ecosystem. And I, you know, you look at it, and this is the defining keystone species of the North. It's the only place in the world it lives. Wild rice don't live someplace else. It only lives here. You know, and in that, all you got to do is take care of your lake, and you're good. You got to take care of your river, and you're good. And that is a pretty great gift that the Creator has given us. You can get, you know, food from the water and sugar from a tree. I mean, you know what I'm saying? This is a really, really good deal we have here. You know, and so to me, it is really important because part of, you know, colonialism and part of, you know, changing the story is that there's no appreciation or acknowledgement, you know, for what is the greatness that is here. There's always been this, no, we need something else because this is what the Native people do. And what the Native people do is what makes sense, you know. And this is, you know, this is my friend Don Goodwin and I on Rice Lake. And you guys are from here, so I don't need to tell you this, but when I go give a talk someplace else, I say, that is not a pasture. You know, because nobody has a conception besides people that are from here like how plentiful wild rice is. You know, and that is, I mean, they have no idea, they have no idea. So this is what biodiversity looks like. That'll be, that's just a point, you know? All right, so this is kind of the, you know, two entirely different worldviews, you know, and those continue to this day, you know, in this day and time, you know, of profound thinking and small arrogant thinking. That'd be the Elon Musk problem there. I kept it, I just said that. I mean, if you would just do something cool. Like I would like it. I'm gonna write him a letter. Okay, so this is where we are at. You know, catastrophes of biblical proportions. Oh my gosh, I so quickly moved to you guys. How did I do that? Okay, here, you guys don't need this part of the lecture anyway, that's why, right? And then this is what William was talking about too, is climate insecurity. You know, I mean, every day I just pray that it's gonna be okay, you know, which is basically what we are all doing right now. You don't know, you know, but also, you know, so just pray and you know, continue on is what I say, do your best each day, but don't be stupid. You know, I mean, this is the time when these rural electric utilities should be preparing for climate resilience by allowing us all to have microgrids and solar. That'd be the smart thing to do. You should have local wind. We should not be trying to figure out how to get something from someplace else for here. You know, because what is happening is this is not made up. This is the reality of the times, whether it is food or energy, whatever it is we need. It is essential that we relocalize, you know, and that we build resilience in our communities. So this is the cause of many of our problems. Now, you know, I'm like all of you, I would assume, like I never really thought about pipelines until about 8 years ago. Then I was like, what the heck? What is going on out there with these pipelines, right? And I'm just saying that because being first world, we have pipes everywhere. We're like, oh yeah, we got pipes, that's all cool. Like, I'm not opposed to pipes, like water and sewer are fabulous. You know, the question is, what is in the pipe and why is it in the pipe and how old is the pipe and who is responsible for the pipe? I think that those are reasonable questions to ask, right? And what happens is that we have aging pipes all over this country, and those pipes, as they're falling apart, the companies are not cleaning them up. And we have more and more disasters and things like parts of cities blowing up and stuff, right? You know, these aging pipes, and so they should be fixing their pipes, you know, not making more pipes. Well, this is the problem that we face, which is Enbridge. Enbridge is the Canadian multinational that just laid to waste a swath of northern Minnesota. And the problem with this is that it's not just Minnesota, it's this question of 75% of the tar sands that come into this country come from Enbridge. They're brought by Enbridge, the dirtiest oil in the world, filthiest, most evil oil in the world, peddled by Canada, brought by Enbridge, right? Somebody needs to say something about that to start with. But we just say, you know, we're just all addicted and we need a lot of oil. Well, most of this oil doesn't even stay here, it goes back to Montreal. You know, so who has the liability? Well, that would be us. So part of the point is that Enbridge basically, as you can see from this map, they basically have a stranglehold on a fifth of the world's water. That is what is important to remember about this. At what point does a Canadian multinational that has been around for 65 years have a right to have a stranglehold on a fifth of the world's water and to not be held accountable for their behavior? You know, at what point do we want to look at what late stage oil addiction looks like? You know, because this is the problem. It is not just line 3. It is, you know, it is this set that they have. Now, this is Enbridge's maps here, and you basically know this story of them shoving this line, you know, after 7 years. I'm someone who has tried everything. Didn't miss a regulatory hearing. Didn't miss a beat. You know, our community groups from Wyeth, our community showed up at every hearing, skated thousands of miles on these icy roads to try to make the system work, and they didn't. You know, and so this is what we got, and this is what it looked like. You know, I'm surprised I don't have a picture of you here, but you know, this is over by oh, I don't even remember. I believe this is on, you know, in Aiken County. I spent a good deal of time in Aiken County. And so you try to make the system work, you try everything you can, and then you put your body on the line. Because what are you going to do? You know, so you say that this is wrong, and I'm going to bear witness, and I'm going to stand here, and I'm just going to keep standing here. And so, you know, I'm someone who has charges in 3 counties, although all my Hubbard charges have been dropped, but I'm still charged in Wadena County, and I'm still charged in Aiken County. You know, and I'm one of 1,000 people who was charged. in northern Minnesota. And we're charged as criminals. And the question I have to try to understand, and I've never quite conceptualized, is why am I a criminal? And Enbridge, which had the 2 largest oil spills in US history, is not a criminal. They busted our aquifers. They stole 5 billion gallons of water. You know, they corrupted our legal, regulatory, and police systems. You know, but I'm a criminal, right? And you know, what was done was wrong. You know, this is what water protectors look like. This is what cops facing water protectors look like. You know, so $8.5 million was spent by Enbridge to make sure that they could get their pipeline in, a Canadian multinational. Now, what part is not wrong about that? You got a foreign multinational who just paid for your police. It just seems profoundly kind of third world to me, actually. Might as well just be El Salvador, and let a Canadian multinational run your police down there too. You know, that's what they just did in northern Minnesota. They corrupted the police systems in northern Minnesota. They pit brother against sister. They tore our communities apart. They tried to demonize us, you know, and villainize us as if there was something wrong with us, instead of the incoherence of the system, you know. This is, you know, one of the cases, but we won this case. This is the case in Hubbard County where they blocked us, our community, into our driveway. Hubbard County did, and the court ruled you can't block people into their driveway. You can't do that. And then this is our arrest on the Shell, and some of these kids are here that were there on the Shell that day. These are my grandkids, and this is the kids, like, we all lived together during the pandemic. You know, those kids couldn't go to school, so they all moved in with us. And we lived there together with our horses, and then we moved down to the river. And we lived there for 5 months on the Shell River, just down from where we harvest wild rice. So this is what I'm charged with still in Wadena County. I'm charged with obstruction. They dropped my trespassing charges. I said, I'm not a trespasser. I'm a tribal member, Mississippi band, Anishinaabe. This is my treaty territory. I'm not a trespasser. They dropped my trespass charges. I'm still charged with obstructing. You know, I thought it was a classic move. We had bicycle, we had logging chains and bicycle locks. There was 7 of us or 6 of us women who were women of my vintage, and we had lawn chairs, and we were on a alleged right of way of an oil pipeline company, and we sat down and we sat there. It poured rain. It poured rain. First time in the drought, the worst drought in the history of the state. It poured on us, you know. And those are our kids from our you know, from our family. They're singing for us. They're singing Sundance songs, those guys, for us, you know. And this is you know, what they look like, Enbridge. And you know, that northern line 5 is the problem. That's what they're trying to go through now. And there's some tribes that, like Bad River, that's their watershed. That's their whole watershed. Enbridge doesn't need that line. They need to start decommissioning it. So I'm going to tell you one more sad story, then I'm going to tell you the solutions. All right, this is Ardio Oppik. You guys all probably know him. He's your neighbor, single largest potato farmer in the world, or in the single largest supplier of potatoes to McDonald's. This is our village of Pine Point. This is what industrial agriculture looks like. This is what industrial agriculture looks like on the Shell River next to the line 5. What is my point here? It's like, how many hits should the river take? Gets crossed 5 times and it's got that industrial ag thing. Who owns the earth? Bunch of multinationals. Is that really who owns all this? Ethical questions for our society. This is the village of Pito, Pine Point. This is where Wei is talking about. This is industrial agriculture and what deep water, you know, deep wells and the irrigation systems look like. That's mostly Ardio Oppik up there on the edge of our village. That's our village there, Pine Point. Right here, you can see the village right there. And then you can see this is to the west here, which is what this would be, is where you have basically the remaining biodiversity in the most biodiverse area in northern Minnesota, in the whole state actually. It's called the Smoky Hills, most biodiverse area. And that is this area here, and then you have this industrial agriculture desert that is happening. And that is a microcosm of what's happening in northern Minnesota right now. They're growing and they're moving out because why? Because there's now water in the places that they've already trashed, like southern Minnesota. And so they are moving in with CAFOs, combined animal feeding operations, and more of industrial agriculture. So we are, working with a lot of others to try to beat them back. And one of the things that we've done is we purchased land. So here's my special land back sweatshirt I have. As part of my therapy program or our therapy program from the Enbridge Corporation, beat up for 7 years. Few nights in jail. I was like, I don't feel very good. I was pretty mad about, a lot of trauma associated with that, When Enbridge got their pipeline in October of last year, I looked around and what had happened is that Enbridge had purchased this land on the right. They had purchased the land on 2 sides of our organization's holding. We had 40 acres. The west quarter was our land for our king and honor the earth. And on 2 sides of us, as a L basically like this, Enbridge purchased the land so that they could conduct surveillance on us. And I was like, so I called up the project manager, I texted him, I said, Paul Ebert, that's his name. I said, Paul, to the best of my ability, we didn't stop you from putting in your pipeline. But do you think we can get that land back now? You want to sell it to me or you want to give it to me? And so he sold it to us. And so that was our first piece. That's kind of like therapy. If you can understand what I'm saying, like who wants to live with those guys anyway, right? You know what I'm saying is like 7 years, I think we should be done, divorced now. That's what I keep saying, I want to divorce you guys. But so we bought it with the help of some foundations. The Series Trust is who basically financed that. And then I felt better, felt a little better. Whew. And then down the road, there's a piece of RDO Offutt land that came up for sale. Not to thank Christy Offutt, the daughter of Ronald Offutt, for arranging that, making that possible. I made a case to her and said, because our village right there, Pine Point, that guy went to school there, my granddaughter goes there. And that village is oversprayed by Offutt. We just lost another guy from cancer. I mean, you can understand what it's like, with already everything we have. And so, you know what, we bought that. And then this year, we had a great time, we put in some hemp. Awesome, man, my therapy program continues. So that's a lot of our thinking, is just keep trying to make what's right. Don't just that. So here's a little about our solutions. Okay, you can take a breath, all that nasty stuff I told you, just let it go. We're moving on, okay, together. I basically want a graceful transition. That's what I want. I don't want to crash my way out. I want to let's make something beautiful. Let's do this. Seems like those guys have no idea what to do. So let's just take some responsibility, step up, right? This is what I'm talking about. So we call it the Sitting Bull Plan. I call it the Sitting Bull Plan because he was a great political leader. And he said many things, including, let us put our minds together to see what kind of future we can make for our children. That's really what this is. Let us put our minds together to see what kind of future we can make for our children, because this is not like somebody's going to save us. Elon Musk is not saving us. You understand what I'm saying? Because there's not like a special Messiah guy who comes and fixes this. There's no carbon sequestration theory. There's, no, you got to do the right thing and make massive transformation. But heck, that sounds like a lot of fun to me. I'm already. I mean, I didn't like the last economy too much, so I'm already involved. Okay, so you start with, this is a little bit of what Gwen was explaining, but this is like a super geeky graph. Oh my gosh, you even have the 2021 one here. Okay, so what does this mean here? This like super geeky graph. What this means is that this is the source of energy, and it has different efficiencies and inefficiencies in it. That's the beginning of your problem. Old coal-fired power plants, combustion level. You understand what I'm saying? It's like some stuff is just not as efficient as other things. And then there's the uses. And then in the end, wow, look at that figure over there, 65% of the energy. That's 65% of the energy is wasted energy. Wait, let me say that one more time. That is wasted energy. Now, let me give you an example of that. What about that burning off those fracking fields? You understand what I'm saying? That might be a good example of an entire waste of energy. Or maybe you have a power plant that's 1,000 miles away from the point of use. Well, there's a waste of energy. You understand what I'm saying? This is like laws of thermodynamics. You're just like, that's just not going to work out. The further away it is. So all this like economics of scale stuff, like make it bigger, and it's gonna be more efficient, that's completely BS. Because what happens is that you make something big and then you gotta transport it halfway around. And by the time it gets there, it's just not as efficient. 65% of our energy, and this is like not from some right, left-wing guys, this is from Lawrence Livermore Lab. So it's not like I made this up with some, thing like that. My point is that the best kind of energy solution is to be efficient. What's so important about that? Because people say, oh, you can't replace your present energy demand with renewable energy. To that, I say, why would you want to replace present demand? If you waste 65% of your energy, what idiot society wants to make 65% more energy than you need to? That's what we need to do, is you got to transform your wasteful systems, number one. And that is everything from your car, which is a combustion engine, which is 16% efficient, as opposed to the electric engine, which is 65% efficient, right? It's like one thing after another. So here it is. Oh my gosh, it's 8 Fire Solar. I work with these guys. They're so cool. They put these solar thermal panels up. Look at that. Then they make them. Wait, I don't know if you understood, these guys make the solar thermal panels, right? Over there south of, right by Osage on Highway 34. Solar thermal panel manufacturing facility. I like that. It's like a tongue twister. And wait, you sell this. Okay, so this is solar thermal. But the basics is like, this is a perfect example of an efficiency question, because people say, well, I want to go solar, I want to go solar. Well, they don't say it like that. They say, I want to go solar. And then they want solar for their heating. I'm just like, no, what you don't do is you don't take sun and turn it into electricity and then turn it into heat. What you do is take sun and turn it into heat. You understand what I'm saying? Like, that's the simple thing to do. Don't make everything more complicated. You take the most efficient set of energy equations, way better plan than trying to make everything like follow through a bunch of loops and you just lose more power, right? All right, then you can be all happy like these guys with that light jumping on the side of your solar. This is one of my favorite solar projects. Now that has got to be the coolest solar project in the world. Like, wouldn't you like to be that? That is Red Lake Nation, right? And those guys, Red Lake was told by the local utility rural co-op, they couldn't do that. They're like, no, you guys can't do something that big. We're like, you got to ask us, we got to do this. They said, just watch. You just watch. That's what they did, right? It's like the coolest thing. We should have that kind of solar everywhere, but you got to do that kind of solar. You have to have cool guys like this dude. This is Bob Lake, right? This is the point. Is that like cool people can do these cool projects. You got to fund the frontline cool people doing it. I'm a big, I know as well as you do. Native people have borne the brunt of the last energy economy. We've been dammed. We've had nuclear waste dumps. Just look at the old Prairie Island. Uranium mining, tar sands. How about we get the cool seat this time? I'll take the cool seat. Like we get to produce it. All right. Then a little bit about food. I always like this. I think it's like true, and I think it is true. And think about it, like even with our wild rice, some places like there's a lake near Mille Lacs, and they drowned it out. They drowned it out for the lakeshore owners so that they can have fancy boats. And they didn't have rice on that lake for 17 years. One lake, another lake, Ogeechee Lake, they didn't have rice for 50 years. And then what happened? A drought. What came back? Rice. It lay dormant at the bottom of the lake for 17 years or 50 years and then came back. That's what resilience is. That's what resilience is. So remember that, be resilient. Be resilient in your, maybe, be resilient. There's some cool people, ladies, with their cool plants. This is Kara, very cool. This is our agriculture programs. Now, what is not cool about that picture? That's a pony. Do you see that pony there? Right. I'm just saying, this is us in the middle of a former RDO offit field on the Ponsford Prairie with our horse-drawn agriculture, right? I mean, this is very much the way you need to do it. And people are like, why horses? I'm like, because the most efficient farm, smaller than 78 acres. The most efficient way to farm is with horses. Interesting thought on sustainability, right? You know, I just don't have a tractor thing, but look at that, that's our squashing this year, is that cool? That's going to the sous chef, actually. I was like, here, take these. It threw them in someone's car, wait, and where's Terry Sue, want to give your wave? There's Terry Sue, that's her with her corn. Right? This is our, wait. This is, wait, I see Josh, holy Christ, stuff. This is our farm on Highway 34. This is the beginning of the pandemic. All these guys moved in with me because they couldn't go to school anyway. So come hang out over with Granny and her horses. It was the best thing I ever did. It's really cool. And I really think that that's the kind of education you need. That's why I was kind of interested. You guys have a horse program here. You know, it's like great to be smart, better to know how to do things. Right? Anyway, so this is some of our hemp. And here's great. But you know, so this is a hemp field. I've been growing hemp for 7 years, state of Minnesota permit and a federal permit. I grow fiber hemp. I don't grow anything you really want to smoke. All I got is stuff that you want to make cool stuff out of. So the thing about this hemp, this is so the outside of it is what you make the textiles out of or insulation. Just consider that the word canvas comes from cannabis. The word canvas comes from cannabis. That's kind of a profound amount of materials, right? The point is that the materials economy could entirely consist of a cannabis economy. We call it the new green revolution. And that's what it really is. It has the potential to transform from a fossil fuels economy, to a carbohydrate economy, from a hydrocarbon economy, right? Because a fossil fuel economy is a hydrocarbon economy, but this is a carbohydrate economy. I just think it's so interesting because the words are almost the same, right? But this is what you want. This is what you want. The outside of it is what you make textiles of. The inside of it is the hurd part, which is what you make building materials out of. Hemp hurd, hempcrete, right? This is what Minnesota used to have, 11 hemp mills. So it's not like, you know, until Prohibition, Minnesota and Wisconsin were two of the biggest hemp producing states. Interesting. You know, the Dakotas, this whole region is very good. Hemp doesn't require any irrigation. It likes its feet dry. I know that from growing it. It doesn't grow well when it's too wet. And so that's what you need is crops that don't need irrigation, right? And also crops that sequester carbon at a higher rate than a forest. This is the cool stuff. And I think about this because this is hempcrete. Oh, do we have some? Did we bring you those examples of it? Yeah, when we have the reception part later, we have some of this hemp insulation that we've been working with. Then this is hempcrete, hemp and lime. But the point is that this is kind of the figures. Like if concrete was a country, it'd be the third largest source of CO2 emissions in the world. If concrete was a country, right? We got a lot of concrete. And we don't need all that concrete. If we went to hempcrete, we would sequester carbon because it grows up really tall. And when it grows up, it sucks the carbon down into it, being the hemp plant, right? It sucks the carbon into it. When it sucks the carbon into it, and it also goes really deep, but it sequesters the carbon in the plant. And then you take that plant and process it. You separate out the fiber element that you're going to make your cool pants out of one day. And then you take the other part and you put it in your building materials. And that is how you sequester carbon with hemp. Oh yeah, this is some of our insulation. I think we have these two things, and this is our rug that we have, which is this is just, you know, when we started working in the hemp, we have a bag coming out in the spring of next year from Patagonia. Patagonia's first North American fiber bag is our bag, and it is our hemp from over by Ponsford, right? And our strategy is really to just keep expanding that because we really think that guys like R.D. Oaphut should just grow hemp. You know, we think all these guys should just grow hemp because that would solve a lot of problems, but they need to do it organic. because it doesn't count if you like are a jerk when you grow hemp. I just say that, you understand exactly what I'm saying, you don't get any cool points for growing hemp like a jerk. You know, but our first hemp came out and I gave some to Patagonia, and then this year I gave to some Navajos, because I said, oh, dumb me, who knows how to read, we'll just send it to the Dene people. And so the Navajos took our hemp and they made some hemp churro wool 60-40 blends and made some blankets out of it. Last couple of pictures here, this is you know, so this is a ship coming into the port of Duluth full of wind turbine parts. Why am I showing you this picture? Because if you want to have a grown-up economy, you don't ship all your stuff from Europe. You understand what I'm saying? We just like got so smart, all those corporations offshore and everything. Textile industry, you know, everything is offshore, including wind turbines. 9/10 of the turbines are manufacturers are European or Chinese. So if you're this big economy here, like, so they got to come into the port of Duluth because it's the furthest inland port to put a wind project up in Nebraska. That's dumb. That's just dumb. You know, so my point is that the opportunity of something like the, Biden's bills on reinvestment and rebuilding, you know, think smart. Don't just put in a lot of carbon sequestration pipelines that aren't going to solve anything except for enable more carbon to be produced. What you need to do is localize your systems, because resilient systems are local systems, whether it is energy systems and also manufacturing. Because we just witnessed in a pandemic, I still, take forever to get parts, right? Forever to get parts. So, smart guys and smart women don't wait for somebody else to make their parts, they make them themselves. That's what grown-up countries do. So I just see this opportunity. Last couple of pictures here. In these times that we are in, not only do you have to have faith, but besides that, just remember the power, of love and prayer and believing. So this is water crystals. I didn't really think about it. I thought, oh, how snowflakes are all cool. They all look different. Well, every crystal is different, right? And it turns out that they keep the story in the crystal. So you get a polluted water crystal, that's what it looks like, right? And you get an unpolluted water crystal and it looks like all cool, right? And so what are these slides here? This Fujiwara Dam after the prayer and before. That is what is really interesting. Is if you pray hard and you believe, because we have power that exceeds us. It's not just us, but it's also these greater powers that are there. You can make things more beautiful. So be the water protectors that make things more beautiful. That's our opportunity. Just have good prayer and good intent. And then make some decent laws. The law of the one dish, one spoon law is perhaps best reflected in the laws made by nations like Bolivia or Ecuador, where the rights of nature supersede the rights of corporations. Pachamama is a part of the Bolivian constitution. That's Evo Morales before the Elon Musk lithium coup. He's back, he's not in the same position. But what they did is they enshrined the rights of Pachamama, the rights of Mother Earth as a part of their constitution. And really it is, what are we doing? I think about this and I remember that when I ran for vice president as a Green, we talked about the 7th generation amendment. That there are the rights, first, private property rights are upheld, but there's no corresponding protection of common property, is there? So the commons are stolen by corporations. Deep sea mining, the air. Someone has to protect the rights of Mother Earth, because she is actually where our life all comes from. Doesn't come from someplace else, it comes from Earth. So enshrined in the Constitution, but this movement, is an indigenous-led movement to transform legal institutions. You know, our tribe supported the rights of wild rice, rights of Monoman. This is the Yurok tribe recognizing the rights of the Klamath River, and these are the keepers of the river. You know, and the dams on that river are coming down. My whole life, I see the dams on that river. I spent a lot of my life on the shores up there when I was a teenager. But these are the keepers, you know, of the Klamath River. And this is Ecuador last December, a year ago, actually, the decision was, I think, a year ago today, where the Ecuadorian Constitutional Court ruled that the Canadian Mining Corporation and the Ecuadorian Mining Corporation, who had mineral claims in the Ecuadorian protected area, that their rights did not supersede the rights of nature. And they canceled those permits. They did not allow them to proceed. So the Ecuadorian Constitutional Court ruled that the rights of nature superseded the rights of corporations. Now that's an evolved legal system. Let me tell you, that's a lot different than Aiken County. Right? A lot different than the laws here. That's an indigenous thinking. You know, that is very much like the one dish, one spoon truth. That is the kind of thinking we need for the future. You know, it is indeed what we grow, it is what we think, it is how we govern. You know, it is our path, and it is the green path. That is what it looks like. You know, and this is really the epic time that we are in, when we get to be on this path and put our hearts and minds together to make that change. So I want to thank you very much for your time, and which.
Yeah, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. Did everybody hear me okay? All right, we're gonna go ahead and transition to a Q&A panel with our wonderful speakers. Just give me a second to grab these chairs that they can sit on. We have microphones now.
Okay, we'll get you a picture. Okay, that was such a great picture. Go back at the new round of pictures this summer of all our awesome.
I'm good.
Like a
It's like, Grandma, why don't you download this packet on
Yeah.
just click the download button.
Our speakers want to start making their way back up front. Take a seat. Go ahead and get started.
No. I know. Fuck that guy. Excuse me. I said that out loud. Well, I don't know. Maybe more. What they. Yeah. Okay, I can do it.
Okay, another thing is we do have a survey for everyone to take. I'll pass out paper copies, but I'm also gonna write these links on the board, so whatever you prefer.
That's
If
super
you're planning
fun.
to go into the after party, we'll also have there and carry it over.
That's
But
super fun.
we just wanna know, like, yeah, what you guys thought of the event, so you could visit, e.umn.edu/sustainability. Wow. Survey, is that legible? It's too
No,
small.
it's not.
Okay, I'm gonna write it on that side of the board, and then also Shay, could you put it, or whoever's the like webinar host, could you put it in the chat? The link. I'll write it again, this is gonna be.
I believe in you, Noel.
abilities.
It's also the same QR code from earlier
Yeah.
that I encourage
We can
folks
put
to
it up on the
do.
screen again, could we? No?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll also talk about, the link is written on the survey, so I can give it to you guys, you can show your friends, yeah.
Thank you so much, Noel.
Yeah.
And like she said, right now, she's gonna be going around and passing out a physical copy of that survey. If you take some time at some point to fill it out, that would be really helpful to us. We're an annually funded student organization, so what that means is every year we have to make the case that we want to continue to do things like this in the next year. So if we have some evidence of people enjoying this event, maybe we could try to do something again next year.
Yeah.
With all that said, let's go ahead and transition into our Q&A panel. Now, Mitakuyapi, Chante Washte Choose. Greetings, my relatives. I shake your hand with a good heart. My name is Dylan Young. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of the Rosebud Sioux tribe, and I'm the president of the Morris Campus Student Association. Tonight, I am your moderator. So what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna have someone in the audience walking around with a mic. You, right, Bree? Put your hands up. Round of applause for Bree. And then for the folks on Zoom, Shay's gonna be there. They're gonna raise their hand anytime anyone on Zoom has a question. With all that said, we're gonna go ahead and get started. We have until about 7:25. All right.
First.
My question's for Teresa. You talked a lot about growing your own food and how important that is to you. What about the time, what kind of time commitment does it mean to grow your food, and what does that time mean to you?
Just say the last part again, and I'm not quite understanding the question.
So, what kind of time commitment does it require to grow all that food, and what is the time you spend doing it and nurturing it mean to you?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it takes a lot of time. Like, why? But I mean, it's more than just, it feeds you in so many ways, not just like the food. I mean, I enjoy going out there, like, you just think like, I have a job where I'm on a computer and you get stuck, and it's so great to go out and physically do something and get unstuck. So I don't know, there's things that, I'll do to make things more efficient. And it's always a learning process. So, I'll put newspaper and grass clippings down to reduce how much time I spend weeding, for example. No, I'm not, I haven't measured the time. The benefits always outweigh, there's just so much there. And it's fun, it's incredibly fun, like you can take a little seed and then plant it, and then just think about the process that it goes through, and then you're in the winter still eating from that little investment of that, planting that seed. That's incredible to me.
All right, next question. I think we had one in the chat earlier. Is that right, Shay?
Yes, one question. This is directed towards the solar panels. Can those heat water in a house system, or is it more just for heating the air of a house?
Yeah. And solar panels that aid wind, sorry.
Our panels currently, they just are for heating air and for heating a home. We've seen them used to extend growing seasons and grow houses, I think 3 months on either end. But as far as water goes, that's something we haven't looked into yet.
It is just a different system because there is a system. that
There
does
is, there is a solar thermal collectors that heat specifically water, and then I think they like use like radiant floor heat and run through pipes and stuff like that. But we just work with air. It's a lot simpler, it's a lot less ducting, a lot less pipes and stuff.
All right, thank you. Do we have another question from the audience?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So tell me about the berries. What kind of berries you guys grow? Have you started like planting more berries? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like planting more bushes and stuff?
Yeah, so we have, I wanted raspberries because I love raspberries. So we planted them, and if anybody's planted raspberries, they spread really quickly, and it's actually, I'll say that's probably a lot of our time is, you know, because it'll take over everything. Blackberries, phenomenal. And I found out that this has just been my experience. The ones with all the thorns are actually much tastier. So that was kind of an interesting thing. You know, we try to make things so they're, you know, and then you lose the taste. And then there's the aronia berries, which were really, I wish Mary Jo was here because she was the one who turned me on to them. And they're so fantastic. They're kind of a mix between a chokecherry and a blueberry in my mind. And this last year was the first year we had like a really decent harvest of them, and they're so good. You pour them out and, you know, like you're making blueberry pancakes or something. And then the tribe invested into doing, you know, like restoring some of the prairie, but we already had the gooseberries,
Yeah.
which I don't know, I can kind of see, I can kind of go off now. Yeah, so, yeah, we love berries. So we freeze the berries, I make smooth, you know, green smoothies and dump berries in them. I, you know, make desserts with them. You know, we make jam with them, yeah. The choke cherries, wild grape, you know, those are already out there, so we just harvest those. And this last year it was interesting because of the drought. The wild grapes actually did really well, so I think that's interesting.
I think that's a lesson of biodiversity because like every year something else does good, right?
Yeah.
Like some years, like in your garden, like your tomatoes will be really good, but that's why we want to grow like all kind of different stuff
Yes.
because somebody will make it good.
Yes.
You know, you don't learn that unless you are growing it over the years. And
Yeah.
just like and like you said, some years is good for berries, or you know, but some and not so good for, you know, some other things. You know, might be a tougher year for rice, but the berries are good. Or I just think
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, and like you, we don't have as big a place, but you know, there's a lot of monoculture around us. And I always kind of just imagine like all the pollinators love coming to our place because there's so much, there's always something blooming and growing, and you know, that they probably are just much happier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we have some questions around this area.
Okay,
Oh,
so this is for Winona and Michelle. So I'm a faculty member here, and one of the things I've heard from our students is just becoming overwhelmed and anxious about environmental factors and racism and systems of oppression and seeing the political system not work and getting to this place of sometimes feeling overwhelmed and hopeless and helpless. So what do you do to help not get hopeless and helpless? Or if you do get helpless and hopeless, what do you do to get out of that spot?
is Michelle up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, real quick, can we find a way to get Michelle's face? The main screen, there we go, all right.
Peleha Kwado, and Winona, thank you for putting me on the spot. You have all the answers. You know, for me, you know, I'm a forever student, and I think in the world of capitalism, and Western institutions, they train you from K through 12, even to higher ed, that it's healthy to aspire to be perfect. Perfection is considered to be what you should do when you're in higher ed and even K through 12. The part of being overwhelmed with anxiety is that they've taken emotions out of learning. So like I mentioned earlier about, first, second grade, they tell you that being an emotional human being is an inferior trait. So it's important now, we have to unlearn and relearn how to be emotional human beings. So, and it's okay to have anxiety. I mean, that's not a negative trait. It's okay to be worried about everything that's going around you because you should. And it's okay to not know how to navigate things. And I've heard so many people of all walks of life that, one thing that they learned, in the pandemic is that the sense of community is broken. So how do we re-engage, recalibrate, rebuild community outside of the capitalistic looking glass? So for me, I always encourage people, go outside, ground yourself. If you're an artist, do your art. If, in those gadgets, turn them off. Like there should be a moment during the day where there is no TV, no internet, no TikTok or all those things, but just kind of pressure down. And my uncle reminded me, he said, we have to learn how to sit with ourselves because we have a storm. All of us are dealing with a storm. We're looking around. And so how do we re-engage and learn how to sit with ourselves? How do we do that? How do we also unlearn and relearn that we're forever students? We're not omniscient, right? And I really feel that we have to relearn how to be emotional. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to not know all the answers. But society has deemed that that's not appropriate to have any of those things. So that's my perspective.
Thank you for that answer. Does everyone else want to take that one?
Yeah, I did just, I know that part of my, every time there'd be a new set of troop movements in the Ukraine, I would plant more carrots. I was like, well, we'll be planting grain now soon. I mean, that's the thing is like part of my response was I just planted more food. And it seemed to like address things in a number of ways and but I think that in general, what Michelle is saying is my practice. Like, I mean, first of all, we live in a pretty great place. So get outside. A lot of people, I mean, we don't need to discuss that a lot of people don't live in way great a place like this. So don't feel too sorry for yourself because you live in a great place. So go outside. And then I have horses, and it is true that the horse therapy is basically, a horse's heart is 5 times as big as a human heart. It's an interesting thing to think about. And if you could feel like a human heart's force, you understand what I'm saying? So just imagine the force field that comes out of a horse's heart, right? And so it steadies you. That makes sense? Like it's something bigger than you, right? So I'm very fortunate that I have a lot of horses. We'll go with that description. But that helps. Go be with something, And then, but then also I think act with agency, because it is not as if we are without agency or ability. We are first world people. What kind of, there's all kind of first world privilege that goes with that. So do something with all your cool first world privilege, and in some way. But I also think that some of that way has to be beyond sending a text message. It really must be with some kind of action, but there is so much cool stuff to do. So, just figure out, just find some pieces I think is really important. And then, I mean, you heard what I said. I do believe it. I do basically believe everything I just told you in this lecture. I think also remember, to be a seed. Be a seed. Sometimes it's a seed of an idea, or sometimes it's a, actual cool squash seed. But those are all that is all about promise and life. You know, planting is really about promise and commitment and relationship and sometimes surprise. You know, so I think gardening is very helpful to mental health. You know. Take that away from me.
Hey, either you want to take that question or should we find another one? Let's go ahead and take another question from the audience. I think there's one around here.
So I know line 5 is about to, I'm not entirely sure what's happening with it, but I've heard that there's something going on with rebuilding it. Are there any efforts against that through Honor Beard, or is anybody else doing anything?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Enbridge 5.0. That's what it is. And I didn't have those pictures in there, but you know, Bad River is in northern Wisconsin, and right now the line goes across their reservation right by the lake Superior. And Enbridge hasn't had an easement on that legally since 2013. Their easement expired, but because they're Enbridge, they feel that they can continuously operate a pipeline without an easement. And so the Bad River has said, you got to move along. You know, we're done. And they've been in court, and the court just recognized the trespass, said that indeed they were trespassing, but didn't close them down. And so, you know, what the prudent thing to do is to keep it up. You know, because someone needs to ask the question, and in my experience is the longer you push, the better it is. You know, a lot of times projects just go bankrupt. It's the end of the party. That's what I'm trying to understand. It's like the end of the fossil fuel era. They are divesting from the tar sands. There's like no more, you know, even the Norwegians and the Saudi sovereign fund divested from the tar sands. Or the Saudi sovereign fund divested. You know what I'm saying is that the party is over. And so what you need to do is just keep pushing them. And what we want them to do is, and you know, there's a push there, a lot of litigation by Bad River. And then in Michigan, they have a lot more problems because they have a 63-year-old pipe under the streets of Mackinac. And they want to double it. They want a new pipe. And the governor, Big Gretch, that's what they call her, Gretchen Whitmore, I think that's her name, Whitmer. She, well, the state is sued them for removal of the pipe. They said that they don't approve of it either. My point is that is really, in the world of unnecessary fossil fuel risks, line 5 is at the top. It puts a lot of water at risk, and it goes back into Canada. So why is it? This is the issue that we are trying to raise with the state of Minnesota all the time. Why would we have all of the liability when all of the assets are in Canada? The Enbridge Corporation's Canadian. All of their money is in Canada. The pipeline we have is not even insured. Like, how's that work? So keep pushing on the regulatory, what is it called? Regulatory prudence. That's what I would call it. It is imprudent for states to allow such a high level of risk with absolutely no bonding. And then the other question is, what about the tribes? Think about the tribes. The state of Minnesota on line 3 has some bonding. The tribes do not. Who's the most impacted? We are. Who's going to be the last to be paid? So my point is like, ask hard questions. And that's what we're doing. We're involved in the legal and the regulatory challenges. You know, I don't, you know, I'm hoping I don't have to take my next set of arrests in Wisconsin. You know, I did not get arrested all of 2022. It was a fabulous year. But you know, it's completely insane. And so, and in Wisconsin, what I did and got misdemeanor charges for in Minnesota, you know, standing in a place they did not like, I got charged for being in my lodge. Wait, let me say this clearly. I was in a lodge on that we had built, a ceremonial lodge on on the shore of the Mississippi River near Palisade. I'm in my lodge and a DNR officer comes and posts a sign that says, I am trespassing. I'm like, I said, I'm here. He's like, he said, you're trespassing. I said, who is trespassing? He said, normal people. That's what he actually said to me. I said, what are normal people? Is that a legal designation? You know, in other words, you had to be like an Enbridge employee, but the rest of us normal people, that was the term. My point is that I have misdemeanor charges. In Wisconsin, being in my lodge and a guy comes and tells you you're in the lodge is a felony. That's when your democracy is hijacked by oil companies. So I'm holding out, I'm gonna keep pushing because I don't want to be held hostage by a bunch of oil companies at the end of the fossil fuel era. The party is over and I'm not an addict, you know? And that's what it is. It's like addressing late stage addiction behavior by governments. And saying, no, we want renewables, we want local, we don't want to move that much stuff around. So I'm gonna just keep pushing on every regulatory facet, including in the state of Minnesota. We want hearings on the Department of Natural Resources mismanagement. Why did we not know for 6 months that there was a breach of an aquifer when they knew in January? Why did they not tell the public? You understand what I'm saying? Why did they take $2.3 million? Why were these subsequent breaches so long and why are they not done? You see what I'm saying? Why are citizens required to do water testing? So we're going to keep raising these questions and pushing them because they're not just Minnesota questions, they're questions of who gets to control the future of the states. You know, so we'll join with people in Wisconsin and in Michigan. We're deporting Gway back to Michigan. He's from a Michigan tribe originally, back in the day. We'll send him over to fight the pipeline. He's like, no, not yet. I'll make solar panels.
All right, thank you for that answer.
Oh, the long answer, sorry.
It's a good answer. Leonard, you got a question?
Hello, so this is a question for everybody, and it's sort of a, I guess, to shift the topic. So one thing I noticed from all of your talks was the importance of community and to recognize relations. And it strikes me that many of us have forgotten that we're all in a common community or don't have a sense of community. And certainly many of us have forgotten that we're all relatives. So how do we remind folks about that? How do we, right, start helping folks feel those sorts of responsibilities to one another, to the land, and to the other species?
Who wants to start?
I'll just say, I think you can hear me. One of the things that I think has connected people as relatives is through story. When we start sharing our story, you know, or our history or whatever, even a recipe, you know, we can make connection to and remind that we have like some commonalities. I love the piece about one bowl, one spoon. Yeah, that's beautiful. So that I think stories are one of the ways that we can remember that we're all related.
Yeah, I think building off of what you just said, I think definitely, especially with Native peoples, we're an oral history culture, right? So I think getting back to, like you said, the roots of that and kind of just connecting, you know, even on the smallest basis of just talking to somebody that you know, that you could text or you could call, but, you know, maybe just go to their house and just talk to them, connect with them face to face, you know, as humans instead of using this little device to, you know, say your words for you. I think that's, yeah, just the simplest way I would think of is just connecting, just talking in person.
Hey, Michelle, what do you think?
Oh, here we go again on the spot. Yeah, you know, I would say to be a forever student creates community. We learn from each other. We need to practice more humility and grace. Community is not about what things we have that are so similar in the materialistic world, or what Western society says that we are. You know, I'm always reminded that if the first thing that you do when you come into this world is you take in a breath, the last thing that we do is exhale. The air is sacred. It's an elder, right? It watches over us. And so if we all breathe the same air, that means we're all sacred. But it takes humility and grace to be a forever student to acknowledge that. You know, so how do we get back to that part of, you know, I've heard so many people say whom I admire, you know, how do we be a good human? You know, how do we lose the journey? How do we lose that footing to be a good human? A good human is not about casting stones. You know, my grandpa used to always say, be careful, you know, how you judge people if you live in a glass house. So how do we get back to the basics? I would say community. And it's also about allowing people to bring whatever layers they can bring. There isn't a cookie cutter recipe that says that, you know, you can break bread with someone or speak to someone only if they have the same frequency or emotional vibration that you have. I think we should be very, have a little more empathy about judgment. That's another way of bringing people together.
Hi, Winona, you spoke a lot about monoculture and agriculture. And I wanted to ask about the monoculture that comes with our obsession with perfect lawns and how much resources we waste on a monoculture that doesn't have any benefits and is really destructive for pollinators and wildlife. And I was wondering what your thoughts are on that, and if you have any insights on how we should go about replacing lawns, if we should look at what was here before. Yeah, like lawn grass, those perfect green lawns that everybody is obsessed with. Should we look at what was here before, or is there a different strategy that we would like to see?
I'm opposed to lawns. No, that's kind of a broad statement, but they're vastly overrated. You know, I mean, and I mean, it's a really interesting thing you bring that up, because it's, you know, I mean, I had a lot of privilege in my life, a lot of first world privilege. I have traveled all around the world. and they don't have lawns. They don't have lawns in Turkey. They don't have, they have yards in which there are berry bushes. You know, there are gardens. And that's really, you know, and then they go to a common place to hang out, right? And they do common things together. And so it's just, you know, to me, it's really, I think lawns are really emblematic, as you said, of waste. You know, that means, and this doesn't mean like I'm opposed to all lawns, but just yeah, I just think that you need a lot more diversity and you know, there's just a lot of other grasses to grow too. And you could just put some goats in your yard and they will keep your grass short. You know, I mean, that's what I'm saying is it's like this, you know, have a little integrated ecosystem if you're gonna have something over there, right? Thank you though for your question. Now, nobody here who's a kid's gonna mow a lawn again, right?
My family has goats, so if you were seeing right now. You have a question right there. And we're currently at 7:20, so I think we have time for about 2 or 3 more questions.
What are some words of wisdom you can give students who think this is for everyone?
Words of wisdom to students. What do you all got?
We could punt it to Michelle.
words of wisdom, journal. Everyone has a story to tell. What is your story? How do you share it? And there's something about pencil, pen to paper that versus using technology that does something different. I would say, always write your story, tell your story, never erase yourself. Be present as best as you can. That would be my advice.
I have a lot of faith in this campus community. I visited a number of times and been in the class, and you have the answers. I want to just props to Dylan here and the student body, how you answered an issue around basically racism. Some of you guys know what I'm talking about, right? And
I don't know.
and the way that you handled it. So here's what I loved about it. I actually sent that letter around to some of us adults and just shared that I have so much hope and faith in this younger generation because you guys you have the answers, you're ready to move forward. So what I liked about what you did is that you not only called out what was wrong and pointed out what was all wrong, but you also then had viable solutions that people can step forward to. And I love that because it reminds us then, instead of otherizing because you got out, you're messed up, you still invited that person in as a part of the human family and a way to redeem or reconcile that error. So I really appreciated that. So I think you just go with, listening to, when I want to hear you guys have like tons of stuff you could do like with this line 5, you could move and go do that work as a student body. You have a lot of power right there to tap.
Thank you for that. You do have any words of advice for us?
Yeah, I would say, just don't forget who you are in the eternal chase of intelligence and status, I guess, if you find something that you really like doing, stick to it. It doesn't matter if it's, a lower paying job or, whatever that could be. Stay true to yourself, just stick to your guns, I guess.
Yeah, I think all of that, and then I just think of that, you got a pretty great opportunity here. You're at this moment where you could kind of, think about some stuff, learn about some stuff, and with knowledge is great privilege and responsibility. And I think that that's always been something is, so just say like our work we do up in our community, like technical writing skills, a lot of people don't have those. If you're a writer or if you've got some writing skills, maybe, we say you could come help us. But the point is that there's a lot of ways that students and the skills you learn in academia can work with community groups. And so that's what I always did when I was in school. And and then there's a lot of, these are exciting opportunities and challenges that, especially a school like this, because you guys got a lot of cool stuff here. I've always liked Morris because of that. I like ag schools because we're growing things, so I just feel like have this opportunity to learn and then apply that, and don't get too stressed out. It's okay. I remember when I was an undergraduate, a lot of those students were really competitive. I was like, I think I'll just do my best, and the creator knows what's right, if I did a good job, don't worry about that. Did you learn something? What'd you learn? This is your time for an education. I always figured like I paid for my education, I'll make sure I pay good one. Right? So I always think of that, like, you know, make sure you get things that you really need out of this. You know, things that you're really passionate about. You know, those really good opportunities, a place like at any college, but here especially, I think.
Thank you all for your words of wisdom. So I was actually way off when I said we had time for 2 more questions. Don't worry, we have a couple of our speakers are going to be at our after party, those that still have questions.